Hi, I'm Susan Bairley with Michigan Golfer here at Eastern Michigan University, talking with one of my favorite people, Shirley Spork. And Shirley is a co-founder of the LPGA, and what I'd like to do today, Shirley, is talk with you about your co-founders and your memories of your co-founders. And I actually made a list of the 12 other members who signed the charter. And I guess I'd like to start, kind of just do it in alphabetical order, but the Bauer Sisters, it's hard to talk about one without talking about the other, isn't it?
Well, Alice and Marlene Bauer came from, they were born and raised in North or South Dakota, and their father moved to the Long Beach and started a driving range, and he started teaching them, and they became proficient as amateur golfers, and he and his wife, or mom and dad, drove them around the country giving exhibitions as amateurs, and they had to give any money that they collected to the father because amateurs couldn't receive money. So he basically used them as a calling card to make a living for the family. And so they became part of the beginning of the LPGA when it was organized. It played very well on the tour for some years, and Alice and I were quite friendly. Marlene was younger. Marlene did not finish high school. She did a correspondence course as we traveled around the country to finish her high school education, and she read books that you would never think of reading, and I'd ask her why, and she said, "I'm trying to educate myself." So as we traveled and she would read, and the nice thing about traveling is we learned about our whole country as we went around from state to state, and that's how she became proficient in education. Alice married and did not continue on the tour, but Marlene won numerous tournaments on our tour, and she still lives in the PGA area in La Quinta, California. I see her occasionally.
Patty Berg.
Well, Patty Berg is very special to me. She was my mentor. When I was a kid in 7th and 8th grade, I read about Patty Berg because she worked for Wilson Sporting Goods and gave exhibitions, and there were articles about her in the newspaper. That's how I knew who she was. And I was fortunate to be able to observe her, play with her as an amateur, and when we played in some events in Michigan, Patty was very dear to me in that she helped me. I drove her car after she won the title holders. I was an amateur playing in the title holders, and she said, "Now, to save you money to get back home to Michigan, you can drive my car to Chicago." So she won the tournament. She won the title holders, and she put the clubs that she won the tournament with in the trunk. And lo and behold, the trunk came open, and the clubs got lost. And I'm driving her car, and I'm listening on the radio that she just won the tournament, and I said, "Yeah, and I'm driving her car, and I lost her clubs, and I'm driving to Chicago. How am I going to tell the Wilson person I'm delivering her car to?" And when I got to Chicago, I said, "I just have awful news." I said, "I've lost her clubs," and he said, "Oh, don't worry about it, because she gets a new set every 4 or 5 weeks." These were her iron clubs and we played a lot of golf together, and she was a very sports-minded person, and she spent her whole life with Wilson giving clinics around the whole country other than playing. And she was a very good player and won a lot of tournaments. But when she'd come to town, like in Los Angeles, and the World Series were on, we'd go up to her hotel and we'd bet on who's going to bat or how many foul balls and how many runs are going to be, and she just talked about baseball forever. That was her kind of hobby. Both of us being Catholic, we would try to go to church together early before we teed off, and that was very nice. And we talked about a lot about Notre Dame and their football team and stuff.
She had to be really special for you because you admired her as a high school student, and all of a sudden to be playing with her on a regular basis.
Just like 2 years ago, to receive the Patty Berg Award was very, very special to me, especially at my age of 89. And I think that was probably the most rewarding award for me, to receive her award from the LPGA.
Absolutely. Betty Danoff.
Betty Danoff started with us. She was our first mother on the tour, who brought her 2 daughters with her. Her claim to fame would be that she beat Babes. Babe had a record, and she beat the Babe to stop the record that she was continuing to win so many tournaments in a row. She played on the tour part-time. She was from Texas. There was and they called her the grandmother on the tour because her kids grew up and her grandkids were out there with her. And she was the mighty mite because she was tiny in stature. She was short and thin, and she could hit the ball a long way. Beautiful lady.
Helen Detweiler.
Well, Helen Detweiler is a very interesting woman because Helen went to school to study and got her degree in law. And at that time, in the beginning of her career, for a woman to be studying and getting a law degree was way special. But she couldn't really get any work. So she, being in golf and sports, she became an announcer for the Washington baseball team. She was an announcer for that. And then when she got into golf, she was in the WASPs, the women's transport during World War II, where they went to the flying. She became a pilot. And when they would go to the Willow Run or wherever they made a plane, they would ferry the planes to the East Coast so that they could go over to Europe to fly. So she met the head, Jackie Cochran, was the head of the WASP, and after World War II, she invited her to come to Indio, California, to write Jackie Cochran's memoirs. And while she was there, Jackie's husband was in the government, I don't know what, but they owned a square mile of property. And Jackie liked golf, and Helen golfed, and they only had a 9-hole golf course in Palm Springs. And they had to drive from Indio to Palm Springs, which was a big total of 16 miles. But Lloyd Odlum said, "Why do you drive all the way there when we have all this land?" So Helen Detweiler designed the Jackie Cochran Ranch golf course. Wow. So she was the first women professional to design a golf course. It's now 27 holes.
Wow, that's amazing. Helen Hicks.
Helen Hicks I never met. Helen Hicks was in New York, and they played a tournament in April of 1949, and when Wilson Spaulding McGregor hired Fred Corcoran to be our tournament manager and go out and find sponsors and start tournaments, he drew the charter up in New York, and it had to be signed by 3 people. So Helen Hicks and Sally Sessions and Fred Corcoran signed it. That's how it got signed, and then they brought it in September to Wichita, where we signed it to start the LPGA. Helen was a business person, and she played golf, and she wrote some articles for Grantland Rice. I have a magazine at home, 19 whatever it was, in the 30s, and the USGA deemed her a pro because she got money for writing the articles for the magazine. So that's why she was she never played on our tour.
Opal Hill.
Opal Hill is from Kansas City, Missouri. She was part Indian. She was very proficient as an amateur, along with Louise Suggs in that era, which was the late 30s. They played a lot of amateur tournaments together. She was very good at that. Opal did play maybe 2 or 3 times, and she had a tremendous touch and feel and putting stroke. And when she putted, the putter had a little loft on it, and it hopped in the air. The first, foot or so, it was up in the air, and then it hopped along, and then zoom, it went right in the hole. She was a tremendous putter. And she played kind of maybe 2 or 3 tournaments a year, but she became a teacher and taught a lot in Kansas City, and she represented Kenneth Smith, which was a private, you could order your club specially built, and she represented Kenneth Smith Golf.
Betty Jamison.
Betty Jamison was from Texas. She was very a student of the art, of modern art. She loved modern art. And when we traveled, every city we came to, she went to the art museum to see all the paintings and artists that she enjoyed. She was a student of Tommy Armour's. And when Tommy Armour taught down in Florida, he had one thing that he always put a little row of spikes on the inside side of the left shoe. And when any of the girls ever went to take a lesson from Tommy Armour and came back and they had little spikes, we knew where they'd been. And Tommy Armour always said, you get off of it, but you stay on it. You get off of it, but you stay on it. And I couldn't understand what that meant until I could do it. And when you turned back, your heel came up, but you still had a pressure on the ball of your left foot. And he had those spikes there to make sure you dug those in. So she was a health person. She believed in health food, and that was good.
Another Michigan gal, Sally Sessions.
About this? Well, Sally Sessions is from Muskegon, Michigan, where they have a 9-hole golf course. And prior to the LPGA, as an amateur, I played there, and we had to play the course twice around. And Patty Berg won that tournament as a pro. She was a pro from the PGA, you know, so it was before the LPGA. Sally lived in Detroit. She was a concert pianist. She loved music. She's a good player. Played in our state, won our state championship. Detroit District. She played the Detroit District in the late 40s. She contacted leukemia and died at a very young age, and that was about all I can remember on her tournament. She the Detroit District of the Michigan State, and she had turned pro. I don't think she played very much on our tour.
One of the founders of the co-founders of the LPGA, and also was inducted into the Michigan Golf Hall of Fame.
Thank you.
Okay, Marilyn Smith.
Well, Marilyn Smith's from Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. I first met her at the intercollegiate tournament in 1948. And she is the longest living friend of mine who lives close by. She's in Phoenix and I'm in Palm Springs, and we talk occasionally. And Marilyn is a Miss Personality of the tour and always happy to meet and enjoyed meeting and talking to everybody in the gallery, and has friends all over the world. And she always wore pearls and earrings, and traveled for Spalding, and been all over the world in 5 or 6 different countries, and given clinics, and worked for Spalding, and played on the tour, and did exceptionally well on the tour. And she runs at, she being a founder of the LPGA, she was president of the LPGA, and in lean times and good times, and helped grow the game. And still, she has a golf tournament in Phoenix, the Marilyn Smith Invitational, and gives back scholarships through the LPGA Foundation. She gives out 10, 15, this coming year, $25,000 scholarships for women who play golf.
Louise Suggs.
Louise Suggs is from our Georgia Peach. She's from Atlanta. She's Georgia. She was on the WPGA, then the LPGA, and served as a president, and gave clinics, played a lot of good golf. I don't know what hobbies she had. I think golf was her main interest. Other than that, her dad was a manager and a pro at a 9-hole course in Carrollton, Georgia, where we played an LPGA tournament, and he was a scout for the Atlanta Braves, and all the caddies caught our practice shots with a mitt, a catcher mitt, a baseball mitt. They would stand out when we hit balls and catch the shots when we were practicing. I remember that, and we played on their little 9-hole course. So we played some 9-hole golf courses. We weren't that many players, but we had to play it twice every time. But that was one of the courses in Carrollton, Georgia, which is the Palmetto capital of the United States.
All right. And last but not least, Babe Zaharias.
Well, the Babe is it. I mean, she would tell you she was it. But she'd come to the tournament, she said, "Oh, I'm here, who's going to be second?" She was a very confident person. She knew she was good, and she told everybody she was good, but because of her desire to want to compete is why we have the LPGA. It was she who convinced the sporting goods companies to hire a tournament director and get the thing rolling, because she wanted to compete, and because she competed. As a kid, I read in the encyclopedia that she did all these sports, and I read that she, and in the 32 Olympics, what she did, and I thought, gosh, if she did all those things, maybe I could do one. She was a long hitter. She was kind of wild, but she was so strong. I've seen her hit shots out of rough, 12-inch thick rough, like it was on a tee, and take a divot a foot long and hit it just like zoom right up onto the green. And she was the drawing card. Because of her, people came to see us because of her, because they wanted to see her. And we gave a swing parade where each of us hit a different club, and she would perform and hit the ball and catch it in her pocket and all these, she was an exhibitionist. Yeah. And sorry to say she died very early in her life. I think she was 42 years old with cancer, and because of her death, our ratings went down, and we didn't have a lot of, we didn't have a star. So we had to find another star to come along, and Mickey Wright came along, and then she became our star, and she won a lot of tournaments. And so you always have to have one main star leader, but today it's a lot different. Today they're all stars. They all can hit it. They can all shoot in the low 60s. And just yesterday, Christy Kerr shot 62 and won the French Open. It's amazing, They hit it so far, and the equipment helps so much, and the training, how they train and bulk up. We just tried to eat the right food and take vitamins and hit lots of golf shots.
All right. Thank you, Shirley, for your thoughts on the co-founders of the LPGA. I know there is also a film, the Founders film, which is now available on DVD. And there's also your book, From Green to Tea, and that's available on Amazon as well. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here, and I hope that in the future many, many more young people will continue on in competing in professional golf and business, use it for their business, use it for companionship, and maybe for competition. There are lots of different reasons to play golf.